The last year and a half has been hard for me, to say the least. Last March, my brilliant and hilarious and beautiful girlfriend Natalie suddenly passed away. Everyone always gave shit about us because of politics. We met in college when we were poli-sci majors. She is very liberal, think AOC, and I'm pretty conservative. We actually met because we were serving as treasurers for our school's college Democrats and Young Republicans clubs, respectively. And our groups would get together for drinks or bowling or laser tag once a month. Well, Natalie and I bonded over a lot of shared interests and we hit it off. Even if we didn't see eye to eye on many issues, debating her was stimulating and formed the cornerstone of our relationship. We've had debates that went on until dawn. We just bounced off each other. She liked to joke that we were drift compatible. I wanted to marry this woman, but she passed away before we got a chance to talk about marriage. I'm in therapy and I'm working through not having her in my life anymore, but it's been rough. Then Rona happened and I got laid off, so I had to move back in with my parents and figure out what I am supposed to do now. My parents mean well, but they got married really young and are more conservative and religious than me. They've been trying to set me up on dates with single girls from their church since I moved back home. But I don't want to date these girls. No offense to them, but it's a small town in the American breadbasket. They don't share the same interests as me and it feels like their only goal in life is to be a good Christian wife and produce a lot of babies. Trying to talk to them about current events is excruciating for me. The girls my parents tried to set me up with take everything they read on Facebook or hear from Fox News for face value. It makes me miss Natalie and our debates more. My parents mean well. I know they want me to find a nice girl and settle down with her, but not like this. They are nothing like Natalie and never will be. I miss her, even if my folks didn't like her ideas. But when I told them the other night that I wanted them to stop setting me up on dates with these girls, they freaked out and told me that I needed to consider settling down since I just turned 30. They're good girls from great families, I know that, and my parents like them more than they liked Natalie, but she was my one and only. I don't think it's fair for anyone when I still love her. They are even more angry at me because I told them that I just don't see myself getting married anytime soon. But like I said, Natalie was my soulmate and I just can't see myself being with anyone else but her. Yet, they are insisting that I need to find a woman and settle down and give them grandchildren. We were seriously close to talking about marriage. But around the time she died, it was more like how funny it would be if the bridal party wore blue and the groomsmen wore red because the bride is a Democrat, and the groom is a Republican / Romeo and Juliet deal. I wish we got to do that. Natalie thought it was hilarious. My husband and I come from the same background. The only difference is that his mother isn't of that ethnicity, so he wasn't raised in the culture like I was. When we started dating, I helped him reconnect with his roots. This eventually led to him reaching out to his estranged father's family and becoming close with them. I think my mother-in-law has sort of held that against me ever since. Throughout the course of our relationship, she has made multiple comments about how she doesn't like the amount of emphasis I put on my heritage. When we told her I was pregnant with twins, she later said something about not wanting her future grandchildren to care about that stuff like I do. I've learned to ignore her comments because trying to explain myself to her has never helped. And I try to avoid conflicts whenever I can. My husband and I decided that the babies would have a first name from our culture, and their middle name would be a typical American name. My parents did the same thing with my name too, so it was just a continuation of that tradition. My mother-in-law ended up seeing texts between me and my husband where we said the middle names. But she assumed that we were talking about first names, so she went out and got the babies matching sweaters, with the names printed on the front of them. She showed the sweaters to me after they arrived. And I thanked her for the gift but didn't correct her on the fact that those were the middle names. I was sort of peeved that she had snooped through text messages to try to find out the names before we told her anyway. So I didn't want to give her their first ones on top of that. Last night when she was over at our house, she told me how relieved she was that we had chosen normal names for her grandchildren, and not a ridiculously difficult to pronounce name like mine. My husband asked what she was talking about. She repeated herself and he told her that actually, the babies did have names just like mine and he expected her to learn to say them. She brought up the text messages and the sweaters she bought, and then my husband explained our plan for their names. She got really pissed at me after that. Said I let her look like a fool for accepting the sweaters instead of telling her the actual names, which we still haven't shared with her, and that she'd be calling them by their middle names since that's what she knows them as now. My husband ended up asking her to leave. And after she was gone, he said he wasn't upset at me or anything, but that he thinks I should have just told her she had the wrong info, instead of lying. I have been with my partner for 7 years. We initially met online, and after meeting in person a few times, and realizing our affection for one another, we found it promising to move in together. I moved from California to Pennsylvania to be with him throughout graduate school. All was seemingly well during this time. I have never really had any reason to not trust him. I encouraged him to very much so, to try his best to make friends, or to explore hobbies on his own outside of the various ones we share, because I have my own passions. And I found we connected most when we met in the middle through conversations about these passions, through the act of explaining or showcasing what we've taken in or learned. Throughout these 7 years, he has struggled with very low self-esteem, and though I don't necessarily think of myself as the pillar of self-love, the depth of mine doesn't reach the low perception of his self-value. Because of this, he has seen and stopped seeing both a counselor and a therapist, and has been on medication to help for the last 6 months. Things were seemingly well between us, and continued to be pretty fluid. We continued to share things, and take long walks, and were pretty open-ended about where we stood in the relationship. If one was feeling a bit of an ebb, the other would pick up more of a share, and vice versa. However, things took a bit of a dip about 2 days ago when I felt the ebb, and asked him about it. Initially, he said there was really nothing wrong. And perhaps I was just feeling this way because with our schedules we haven't been able to see one another for long periods of time like we are used to, which is true. But the feeling continued to irk me, and when I asked about it a second time, he confessed to me. He had begun talking to another girl from another country via Instagram direct messages. And though things between she and him never crossed the boundaries of platonic friendship, he really loved the initial rush of someone asking him questions about his favorite movie, his favorite album, his favorite book. All things he and I already know very well about one another. I asked if he'd sent any selfies, or anything risque, and he said no, though I can't confirm, because he deleted the messages. A good deal of me believes him, because of how open he was about the initial conversations to begin with. We slept apart, and I just felt really confused the entire night, because I couldn't really resonate with wanting that sort of attention from someone else. If anything, his yearning for that type of attention sort of hurt. It felt like I wasn't doing enough, or giving enough. The next morning, though I don't have an Instagram, and am not on the app, I went to check his using the desktop version, and found that posts where he once called me the love of his life, or a specific post with a gift I gave him that once said, "Greatest gift from the greatest girl," were still on his profile, but the words, girlfriend, or love of my life, were completed erased. With this realization, my confusion and hurt turned to very real heartache. I called him and asked if he had deleted these words from the specific posts, and with shame, he said yes, he did. When I asked why, he said it was because he just didn't want the attention from the girl asking him about himself to be disrupted if she found out he was in a long-term relationship. I guess this is where I asked the obvious and questioned why someone who is just asking about your favorite books, movies, etc., would be driven away by the fact that you have a girlfriend. And he said he didn't know why he did it, and that it was a massive mistake. At the risk of seeming toxic, and I will take full accountability for seeming so or being so, I asked him to please deactivate his Instagram for the time being while we sort through this, his Twitter as well. He did, and though I was feeling a bit of relief about that, I couldn't help but feel a bit saddened that he didn't choose to do that on his own for the benefit of our relationship. He had to wait for me to ask. Which again, just made me feel like such a toxic and controlling partner. Two things I always strive to be so far from. When he got home from work, we discussed everything at massive length, and he continued to swear up and down that these conversations pertained strictly to music, movies, and books, and he didn't have interest in her. Just interest in the initial rush of the attention he was receiving. We read a few articles, and he broke things down to me as his self-esteem has never been lower. Despite his career as a doctor being at a high, and his finances in order, he felt things with his music weren't taking off. And with that came a feeling that he wasn't special, and it was nice for someone to make him feel that way. I felt shame and asked him if I wasn't doing enough or giving enough to him to make him feel that way. He said, I defiantly was. But my love, and attention and affection, became a pillar he could rely on, and got used to, so with new attention came a rush. And he liked that. I asked him if he wanted to be single, and find that rush in dating new people. And he kept insisting that that's so far from what he wants. He wants to remain a couple, and do all he can to work on these things together. Though I can't help but correlate that feeling he enjoys with the feeling of a first date. Which hurts, of course. I told him I didn't really see how we could move past this because there was nothing much for me to make an attempt to work on moving forward. This seems to be a self-stemming problem that I emphasize with, but just don't want to be on the receiving end of the counter effects. So though it is incredibly uneasy to begin to think of how difficult it'll be to begin again, it is just as difficult to think about how difficult it would be to stay and try to rebuild back up an issue that I feel like just a bystander. When it comes to, this has all been very painful, and if this comes to an end I just want it to be as civil and as possible. He deserves to love himself, but not at the expense of the love we have between us. I deserve love that is stable and comforting, and not laced with newfound paranoia. Despite this all, my heart is still very much in this, of course, and he has been very vocal about how it was just one mistake. Nothing happened, we can work through this, etc. And I secretly keep hoping he will make a step, any step really, to showcase these words and implement action. Seek a new therapist. Find the two of us a relationship counselor. Buy a book on self-help or on how couple conquer affairs. Anything at all. Without me having to be the one to ask him. I just want him to have that yearning that he continues to say he has, but instead of saying it, I was him to show me. That makes me irrational or just plain dumb. I believe to be in a state where I can handle either answer. Or something completely different, just the same. Do all think I'm blowing something completely out of proportion? Given how this was an exchange of conversation between him and another girl for just a few days. And his erasure of me on his profile was only for about 2 days? This has been a first in this relationship. This has been a first in my life, truthfully. I just felt completely vulnerable and isolated. I am a high school math teacher, and we were creating a schedule for next year and divvying up workloads. I noticed I got almost 50% of the test creation and had 2 plannings missing from my schedule next year, for every one for the other 6 women in my department. There are 8 of us. My department head assigned herself nothing as she is managing and needs every prep. But that's another quibble. I am not the newest and in fact have seniority some of these women, but I'm also not the most experienced, so it's not like these are struggling new teachers who need help. So, I asked why it was divided this way. I was told, well, Ms. Millie is pregnant and the rest of us have families. If you have to stay late, it's no big deal. I can go to my principal and deal with it that way. What they've done actually breaks the union contract. But I really was offended by this. I tried to explain my offense, and they literally stared at me gobsmacked. I actually want to know how to discuss this with them. These are all women who I have previously gotten along with and liked. When the last one, Ms. Millie, got pregnant this year, there have been some conflicts. She is in my grade level. And they made me take on some of her work basically because she had some complications. This I did, but I think planning for me to do more is very different than an emergent health issue. As well as some uncomfortable situations for me, having to participate and buy stuff for her baby shower. When I'm not really into those things, but I did so to not cause waves. A lot of people have advised go to the union, go to the principal, and I absolutely will if necessary. I want to be clear, I'm not worried at all that I'll be forced to work this schedule, but these are my colleagues. Many have been working with me 5+ years, and we have lots of meetings and times together, where it's helpful to get along. So I do try to get along, like the baby shower thing, and be a good work friend and colleague. I just want a better way to communicate myself than I had today. I was entirely shocked and very indignant and just found myself unable to express myself well, and I was hoping for ways to approach that someone with their attitude might understand because I can't empathize with it at all. myself and viewing the other side is how I always try to look at problem solving.